because I will be here and we will be presenting on various topics to help English language teachers specifically. Today we're going to talk about evaluative writing projects for teams. I'm Shelly Terrell, and you can email me at shellyterrell@gmail.com and get a certificate of attendance. And yes, Faisal, I know I owe you tons of them, like 10 of them. But you can also get all the links for these different types of presentations, even if you missed them, because we've done about 25, at least 25 to 50 different ones over at bit.ly/ELT links, and it is case sensitive. So you'll find plenty of great sources. Today, I want to talk to you about my experience when I was teaching teenagers writing and some of the things that I had them do. But first I want you to think about what skills do we need to teach our learners. And when I think about me as my role as an English language teacher, then I often think that it's not only that I need to teach them about language, but language is equal to communication, in my opinion. So when you think about communication, then then I automatically think, well, what would my learners need in order to be good communicators? So what do you think your students need to be able to do to be good communicators? You can type that in the chat box if you would like, and I'll read them out loud. So what do they need to have that's pretty good? Okay, vocabulary, yes. They need to have good vocabulary. Reading skills, yes. Very good. So Clive said vocabulary. Faisal said reading skills. Any other suggestions? Research skills. Okay, so Faisal said research skills. Angelis B said speaking skills. Yes, all very good. I call these, all of those would fit under this, I think, which is listening, writing, speaking, and reading. Yes, safety in class, that's a good one too. That one's not listed here, so there may need to be more that blanket off of this. But those are, the skills, I'll go back to that we need to teach. Okay, so listening, writing, speaking, reading. The problem becomes, and vocabulary, the problem becomes that I found when I had to teach was I had 12 different countries represented, and there was about, I think maybe about 70 students in my program, and they were different, even though we had them in their specific levels according to the test they took, because they did take a test, and they came in, and we had our beginners, and we had our advanced, and then we had our transitioning students, and we had our intermediate. Even though these would all be in the same class, I noticed that each one of them struggled in different ways with their writing, listening, speaking, and reading. And I'm sure you found that too, that some of your students are really great writers, but they're not really great speakers. Some are really good at readers, but they don't have very good listening skills. So I think that's a big problem that we all face, and it's something that we have to try and develop in our assignments. How do we appeal to all of these? How do we address all the skills so our students, each of them, since they're all unique, since they all have different levels, they all need to achieve something differently? Well, how do we do that? Well, the way that I found that we do that is simply through project-based learning, hands-on learning. Get them to use all the different skills. So when I do, for example, a writing project, it's not just a writing project. Each writing project will have a presentation skill. So each writing project, can you hear me a little bit better? Is that better? I hope so. Sometimes it's the internet connection too. But each writing project has a presentation that goes with it, or it has an activity that involves listening, speaking, and reading as well. So it's not, and researching as well, actually. So that way the student isn't just writing, but they're doing so much more. It becomes a project that encompasses everything. And nowadays we have so many tools on the web that allow us to do this. But even if we didn't have tools on the web, even if we don't have an internet connection, each of our students probably has at least a cell phone. And most cell phones have like an audio recorder, or they have a video recorder. Or one of the things that I used to do is I used to bring digital camera to class, and it was just one digital camera, but I would just have my students be able to use the digital camera to be able to do their projects as well. So there's always something that you can do to make these projects interactive. So how about the test, objectives, and curriculum? Well, we're going to have tests, we're going to have objectives, and we're going to have a curriculum. This is just reality. And I think, yes, okay, we know about the tests, we know about the objectives, and we know about the curriculum. One of the things that I do when I first begin the year is I try to really focus on knowing what the tests are going to look like, what the objectives are going to look like, and what the curriculum is going to look like. I go through the book. I go through the syllabus. I go through all of this because these are things that I have to cover. But what I do is after I do all of that, I know it well enough to where I can say, this is how I'm going to adapt. This is how I'm going to make it to where I can, this is to where I can adapt it. So I'm not tied to these things. I try to ask myself, how can I play around with this information and make it very interesting and still get my students to do very, very well on the things at hand? And I think we can do that. One of the things is when I was in Texas, my students, even though I swerved from the book quite a bit, oh, that's a good question. Clive asks, is tech always necessary? Do projects need to be interactive? I say yes, especially with language teaching, because language is a two-way street. Language isn't solitary. We learn language and we have the motivation for language, so that way we can interact with others, so we can communicate with others. So I think that as far as language teaching goes, that projects do need to be interactive, and I think we need to have as many various communication as possible. So that's a very good question. Tech isn't always necessary, but I do think that tech is very important if we have it available to us, because it allows our students to publish online digitally. And if the excuse is we just don't want to use text, then I think that's not the best excuse. But if it's that we don't have it, well, then that's a different matter completely, and I completely understand about that. And there were some times when I only had maybe a digital camera to work with in my classrooms. But then, that's what we would use, was the digital camera. And then later on, when I was at home, I would upload and do what I could do at home, so my students would be able to still, if they went to the library and they were able to get the internet from the library, they could check their projects and stuff like that. So I think if we can, we should use tech, because it goes to our audience, and that's what language is about, I think. So I hope I answered that well. And then I think, some people argue against rubrics. I love rubrics, though. I don't, they're very flexible, but this is an example of one of the rubrics that I use. I use this one for projects, but there's so many out there, and I'm going to share with you some sites in the bit.ly address. But this is what it looks like. Basically, you have a category like the introduction, and then you give a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1. Each of those, you average it out, and it becomes what the student has. So the highest, okay, so here it says, the following is how I will grade your final papers. This is just one example. There are 11 categories with 4 points each. That equals 44 points. 6 points for your works cited page, which is just a bibliography. And the rest of the 50 points for following instructions. and formatting your paper correctly. Okay, so these are pretty flexible. I mean, it just gives ideas. But another way that I also do this is I have checklists, and I basically, the checklists are an easier way for students to go over the rubric. Now, I just don't hand out the rubric. We go over the rubric. We actually talk about the rubric, and we also I make sure that my students understand the rubric. And the checklists are pretty easy. It comes really simple. It's just like this. Did you use at least 5 vocabulary words we studied this week? I don't tell them which ones. We study 100 vocabulary words. They get a list. So maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20. As long as they use them, they get to choose which ones they use. Did you include an introduction? Now, these aren't all the things, but there is a checklist that I have them do, so that way they know. And this is pretty easy, I think, for a majority of language learners to understand. Did you support your argument with reliable sources? Did you include a list of references? So this is something you can do. And you know what your students, what you want them to accomplish, what you want them to include. So I think this is a good thing. So I'm going to go into the assignments, but another thing about grading is I also comment on each project, and I also get each of the students, because there's a presentation component, so I also get each of the students to also grade each other. I get them to, so when they give a presentation, they have to argue with each other. And then they also have to, they get like a little form, and in the form they say, what would you grade? And it's completely anonymous. And then they have to explain why they would give this grade to this presentation. And I consider all of that within the grade. I even ask the student themselves, what kind of grade do you believe after seeing all the presentations and after seeing the work that your other students, because it's like them presenting. It's like if you've ever been in a doctoral candidate. As a doctoral candidate, you have to go to a board, a row of people, and you have to present to them this paper that you spent all year writing, or 2 years, and you have to present it to them, and then they tell you whether you pass or fail. It's the same thing that I think with students. I have them present their paper. I have them make a PowerPoint presentation or a movie or a video or a poster. It's up to them. And some of my students didn't have text, so some of them would do these huge elaborate storyboards on paper, on a big poster board. They didn't use the tech for that, but they did an awesome job, and I didn't take away points for that whatsoever. If that's what they wanted to use, then that's what they were able to use. I didn't choose the medium for them. I let them choose the medium for them. So one of the things that I did was I told them, okay, so the students, I told them to grade each other, and then I asked them to grade themselves, and then this is how we would come up with the final grade. So these are a couple examples. So one of them they did was they had to do point of view. Now I showed them this really cool YouTube video. I'll see if I can find it, and what I'll do is I'll just put the link in the box, because if I try to if I try to show it, it's just going to make the problems with those who have lower connection much worse. But basically, it's Little Red Riding Hood, and then she does some kind of karate or something to the... So I'll go ahead and I'll show you. This is what some other students came up with, and I think it's hilarious. So this is what I showed at the beginning. You can take a second to go watch this video if you would like. And it's really funny. It just shows a different way of Little Red Riding Hood perspective. And then what they did was they actually created the stories themselves. And then part of creating the story is you needed an audience. So not only did they rewrite the children's story, they created the books, and they could do this offline, but they also did this, they actually made books in this circumstances, and there is a reason for that. Why we didn't use the technology was because we decided to read them to the kindergarten and elementary classes. So this was something that we did. was we took the books and then we all read them to different classes. So each of the students got to read their book to a different class. Now, I think this was a very meaningful project. A lot of the students loved it. They loved visiting the kids. They loved seeing that the kids really responded to their story. They loved that they had to think about the audience, the vocabulary, the grade level. And it also made them really think about what they were going to write. Like, they didn't just write things that were objectionable or anything, because they knew their audience was other kids. So I think this is a really, really great assignment that they really loved. And they came up with some fabulous books for this. And they could choose anything. Some of them wrote sad stories. It depended on the culture. So some of them had written stories, for example, The Little Mermaid. Some of them had chosen different things like The Three Little Pigs. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this. This is a little hard to read. This one is called Evaluate Lyrics. Now I'm going to actually show you a sample of one of my students writing, which was really amazing. So what I did was, okay, teenagers love rap music. They love modern music. They love modern English music. A lot of times you'll see that a great way to motivate your students to really learn English is to use lyrics. The problem is that lyrics aren't always the great way to teach English, because sometimes it has slang, well, at least that's what I found. So one of the things I did was, so I told them to bring lyrics to a modern song to class. So first of all, and these, I want you to understand that these projects they took like a week, 2 weeks to do. So it wasn't just like a one-day assignment. So one day we would go for this assignment, we would bring the lyrics, we would get in a group, and we would share the lyrics to songs that we liked, okay? And then we would circle all the slang phrases or the words that we didn't understand. And then we would talk about why they liked the lyrics and things like that. And then they had to take some of the words and phrases after we discussed them all, and we discussed what they could mean within context and things like that. And then what they did was they had to do some research. So they took the lyrics back. They researched the phrases on the internet. I let them use the rap dictionary. There's a slang and there's an urban and there's a rap dictionary. I let them use that to research the words because they're learning researching skills. They have to know how to use a dictionary. This is a fun way that I thought that they could use it, and they did have fun. I had them interview some of their friends, and this was really good because they were in American school, so I wanted them to get and interact with the American student. So they had to interview some of their friends, read music magazines to define some of the words and phrases. And finally, they had to see the origins of these words and phrases. And this was teaching them the roots, because you know how we have to teach them the roots and things like this. So I thought this was a great way to kind of get all of this. And then also to look at the video and to look at the nonverbal elements. This is what one of my students wrote. I thought it was really good. And then the student presented. With this assignment, they had to do a debate. So the students did, yes, rap music should be allowed. No, rap music shouldn't be allowed. So some of the students, they had to come to a decision in their essays whether or not the message warranted that they should allow this kind of music and this kind of culture. And some of the students did believe, no, it shouldn't be allowed after they evaluated some of the lyrics. And then others believed that, yes, it should be. So then this is what they would do, and then at the end of it, we would come to an agreement. This is some of the writing that came about. One of the students wrote, Sierra, a hip-hop singer, once said her goal was to deliver a positive message and let people know they are not the only ones going through things. She tries to make her work as impressive as she thinks. She chooses to create a message that gives people longevity. This message is portrayed in her song, Goodies. In Goodies, there are several slang phrases Sierra uses. For example, lack is a short word for Cadillac. I'm not going to read all of this, but I'll go through it. When she uses shoddy, it means female like baby or honey. Okay, so it goes through all of this, okay? And then it says, the message Sierra gives in this song is for her younger female fans about respecting themselves and not giving their goodies to just any man. If a guy is looking for the goodies, then they must keep on looking because they stay in the jar. And he quotes things from the actual lyrics. Many girls run across this problem. Um, a guy thinks the girl is going to be with him because he is popular and has attractive qualities. However, that isn't the case. Popularity isn't going to make girls give a guy their number, and that's definitely not going to make them go home with just any guy. And then he continues, most rap includes slang phrases or even filthy language. However, these words don't stand for villains. It's another powerful way to express and explain the singer's mind. In Sierra's Goodies, it's a good example of using a powerful way for young female fans to understand her message. It not only gives listeners a deep impression, but affects their thinking and actions. Thus, it sometimes can be a useful teaching tool. Should parents stop their kids from listening to rap? My answer is no, unless your kid is a troublemaker. So I think that this was an excellent, very thoughtful type of writing that came from the student. And you notice how the student used the dictionary. They used citing skills. They even quoted. These were all the skills that, that somebody would need to know for English and for writing. And all of this was done in a very fun way because they really were interested in this kind of music and things like that. So this was just one of the pieces of the writing that I thought was really incredible from this. Assignment number 3. Bring an advertisement or television clipping you feel inaccurately or inappropriately represents a given group. So what I did was I told them, there's so many advertisements out there. I want you to go to YouTube, or I want you to go to your magazines if you can't go to YouTube. I want you to go to the newspaper, select any of the advertisements, and tell us how you think. Look at the stereotypes, and I had them actually circle them and then put lines and then write on, say, okay, this is what is wrong with this advertisement. First of all, it is false advertisement, or second of all, it is exaggerated. I mean, these are the things that they came up with, when evaluating the different advertisements out there. And so this is what I had them do. And then I said, write an essay that details these points. Well, in this kind of, and then they would come up with things like, in this kind of a advertisement, it makes it seem that for one of my students, he did it on Nike shoes, and he said, in this kind of advertisement, it makes it seem that only African Americans are basketball players, and that's not a true that's not a very good stereotype. And then after they wrote the essays and things like that, they had to redo the the they had to redo their advertisement. So for example, if it was a video advertisement, which the Nike commercial was, my student actually, and I couldn't find this, I would have loved to show you this, but my student actually got all the kids in his dormitory to help him reenact this video advertisement. And it was just amazing, the kind of things that they came up with. They wrote such great essays. They got to evaluate how the negative portrayals that society has in advertisements, and then they had fun just by recreating the advertisement itself. So some of them did posters again. Some of them did video advertisements. A lot of them did video advertisements because they loved using the digital camera. But they just came up with really, really amazing things. So this was another type of idea that we came up with. And I think this is cross-cultural. I mean, I think that in some of the countries, I know it's going to be particularly hard for you to come up with these kind of things. So I think that if you can't do it with your country, then maybe you can do it with American culture, or maybe you can find a way that's allowed in your country, because I know I have English teachers in Saudi Arabia and other places, and they wouldn't be able to do some of these things. So just bend it or make it flexible enough to where you can include it into your type of scenario. But we're almost out of time, so I'm going to go through these quickly. Another idea, and this was one of the most powerful ones. This was the end of year idea, and this is what I kind of recommend as end of year. But this is what I kind of recommend for the students at the end of the year after they get used to these projects, because this is a really tough one. And some of you may not be able to, once again, do this through yours. But I really like to get my students to do much more than writing. I like it to be realistic. I like it to, well, I like it to touch them inside. I like it to make them think about themselves, because teenagers are at a development point when they're learning to become adults. I want them to critical think, exactly like Angeles B said. I want them to critical think, and I want them to learn citizenship. I don't think we put our students in enough situations to where they get to make decisions and where they get to decide, if this was me, then how would I do it? But they're going to become adults really soon, and they're going to have to make really tough decisions. They're already adults already. Those who work in these companies, for example, that cheat people out of tons of money. And I think maybe, if we had to make tough decisions, then they wouldn't get to this point. But so that's what I try to do with the writing. So this was this is the last one I'm going to share with you. There's tons and tons of more. But it says they had to choose anyone throughout history who committed an act of atrocity. And they could do anybody. Some of them, a lot of them chose ones from their own country. Which I was really, really surprised, because I wasn't really sure if a lot of them would do that. And then they had to, I gave them examples, but they were never limited to examples. They had to research brief autobiographies of the lives, save at least 5 photographs of the atrocity. And this is because I think that the visual element really would impact them. So that way sometimes, people need to see what's going on to really get that emotional impact. And then they had to write a first-person point of view in which they imagined that they were the actual person. And I think this was the toughest part for them. A lot of them said it was, because they also had to present this as well and talk about it. And that they had to say in their essay why they committed the act, and if they regretted the act and why. So they had to actually give an apology at the end of this. And a lot of students really, really, really liked this kind of essay. It was tough for a lot of them, but they learned a lot from it. And they were able to really this one was really good for history as well, because what happened was that a lot of them, they'll read the history of things, but they really don't connect with it. It's different when you read things from a book. You can read about the Holocaust, or you can read about civil rights movement, or you can read about even in the camps and the history between the Japanese and Korean War and all of these issues. But sometimes when you read about them, you just read about them and it doesn't really register emotionally or digest with you, or you don't remember it. But for my students, with this kind of assignment, they did. And then the other students, when they were evaluating them, they really, really, because remember, at the end of all of this, other students heard their presentations, they heard their apologies, and they also had to evaluate them on this. And so that's what happened. So these were a couple of writing projects that included listening, and included presentation skills, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So these were just a few ideas. I'd like to hear some of the ideas you have. I think that, a lot of these ideas that you can incorporate whenever you do writing, the object is, don't just make it a writing project. You can always add a presentation skills to it. You can always add an oral, a listening. You can always add more to it. make it more than just writing an essay, because then you can also get your students to practice the other skills as well.
Okay, thank you. Hello, do you hear me? Yes, good. Thanks, Ellen. Well, I think that is a really great presentation. And I don't know, I believe in Chinese proverb which says that tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. Well, I'm with the project-based instruction or project-based learning, and I do believe that one size, I don't know, one size does not fit all, approach, or one size fits all. Well, I'm this with the second one, then one size does not fit all of the levels of students. What else that um, because I think that by project-based learning we get all the students to participate in the project itself, and really even the shy students or passive taciturn students, they take their roles, um, and maybe they work in the groups or whatever, but the teacher can assign the roles to the students, or they can sign sign the roles by themselves. I think it's much better. But also, we teach them life skills. We teach them presentation skills, because at the end that they have to present the project itself. I don't know whether they are doing in a drama, a role play, or a storytell. I mean, a kind of storytelling, or etc. But at the end, they have to come to the front of the class and present it. Also, we can teach them organizational skill. I mean, because by this they can organize themselves. They can, organize set the roles by themselves. Some of them may take the role of writer. Some of them take the role of leader, speaker, etc. So we have different roles, and they can sign the roles by themselves. Um, I don't want to say more. Just thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Faisal. I thought those were really good points, and you're right. It's not one size fits all. And like I said at the beginning, a lot of times